began at dawn, as promised. The great hall smelled of beeswax and cold stone. Marta had not slept. None of them had. But the table was cleared, fresh candles burned in the iron holders, and the unsigned documents from previous sessions had been replaced with blank paper. Lord Henrik sat at the head. Lindqvist and von Dessau took chairs across from each other, and for the first time neither angled his seat away. Wenger sat beside von Dessau with his portfolio open and his pen ready. Arvid stood behind Lindqvist, arms folded, watching the windows where frost spirals pulsed with that slow, deep rhythm. Brother Felix had come down from the monastery and stood near the hearth like a thin white birch that had wandered indoors. Marta took her place behind her father's shoulder and listened. Lindqvist spoke first. Passage writes, "The northern road through the Kowalski province. Sweden requires unimpeded movement for supply wagons between Torun and Krakow." "Unimpeded is a word that hides soldiers inside supply wagons," von Dessau said, but he said it without venom, almost with a wry half-smile. "What guarantees can you offer that passage means passage and not staging? Written inspection writes for Lord Kowalski's men at the bridge and at the crossroads south of Noe Staw. Random, unannounced. If military materiel exceeding agreed limits is found, the agreement is void." Von Dessau blinked. Marta saw the surprise register and vanish behind diplomatic composure. "That is more than I expected." "I am told honesty costs something," Lindqvist said dryly. "Consider it my payment." They moved through the terms with a speed that startled Marta. Quartering limits. Compensation schedules for Sandomirs, with von Dessau dictating specific sums while Wenger recorded them in his careful hand. Timber rights at the bridge, split evenly with a neutral assessor appointed by Lord Henrik. Reparations for merchants robbed on the Salt Road. Each point was argued, refined, and settled with a directness none of them had managed in any prior session. Marta translated where needed, but she found herself translating less. The men were speaking to each other now, not through her. Lindqvist switched from Latin to rough German when a point required precision, and von Dessau answered in kind, and the words flowed without the poisoned undertow she had felt in every previous exchange. The hum beneath the floor softened. Marta pressed her boot against the stone and felt it diminish to almost nothing. She caught Felix's eye across the room. The monk's lips moved silently. "Is it working?" She allowed herself a fraction of hope. By mid-morning they had a draft. Not a treaty, neither man had authority for that, but a provincial accord, detailed and specific, covering the roads and bridge and villages within Lord Henrik's governance. Wenger produced 3 clean copies in the time it took the others to stretch their legs and drink warmed beer. All 3 men signed. Lindqvist pressed his seal into red wax. Von Dessau used black. Lord Henrik used the old Kowalski stamp, a wheat sheaf and crossed swords. Marta watched the wax cool and felt the ground steady beneath her. For 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3, the world was simply a room with men who had chosen to be decent. Then the floor cracked. Not the subtle vibration she had grown accustomed to. A sound like a cannon shot rang through the stone foundation, and a fracture split the flagstones from the eastern wall to the center of the hall, steam hissing from the gap. The table lurched. Ink spilled across the freshly signed documents. Candles toppled and guttered. Felix gripped the mantelpiece. "Too late," he whispered. "Oh, God forgive us, it was already too late." The second crack ran perpendicular to the first, and the floor buckled upward in the center of the hall by a full hand's width. Heat poured from below, and with it came the smell Marta knew from the cave, ancient mineral and ozone, and something electric that prickled the skin. From outside came shouts. Marta ran to the window and saw the courtyard flagstones splitting in radiating lines, steam geysering from each fissure. The eastern hills were visible above the manor wall, and the amber glow she had seen from the chasm was no longer faint. It blazed. The entire hillside shone as though a furnace door had been thrown open inside the earth. "The cave," she said. The sound that followed was not an earthquake. Earthquakes are chaotic. This was structured, a sequence of deep concussions, rhythmic and deliberate, like something enormous striking the underside of the world with both fists. Each impact sent a shockwave that Marta felt in her teeth and her spine. Plaster rained from the ceiling. The signed documents slid off the tilting table. Lindqvist seized the nearest copy and shoved it inside his coat. Von Dessau did the same. Even now, even in this, they kept the agreement. The eastern wall of the great hall split from floor to ceiling, and through the gap Marta saw the hills. The cave mouth, distant but visible as a dark oval on the hillside, was no longer dark. Light poured from it, white and amber alternating, and the ground between the manor and the hills rippled like water. Trees bent. Snow sublimated into mist. The bare circle around the cave that had been 100 yards now consumed the entire eastern slope. Then silence. Absolute, complete, deafening silence. The hum stopped. The cracking stopped. The steam froze in the air. Marta's heart hammered, but she could not hear it. She saw Felix's mouth open in prayer and heard nothing. The silence lasted 7 heartbeats. On the 8th, the hill broke open. Not the cave mouth. The hill itself. Stone and earth and ancient limestone split along the carved spiral lines that had been etched into the bedrock before human memory. And from the wound in the earth rose light. Not fire, not magic, but the raw luminescence of creation itself. The light that had existed before anything else did, because the being emerging had made light before he made the stars to carry it. Marta could not look away. A figure rose from the shattered hill. He did not climb or crawl. He simply was, standing on the broken stone as though he had always been there, and the hill had merely been in the way. Tall, though distance made it hard to judge. Dressed in clothes that should not have existed in this century or any other. A white shirt, a gray vest, dark trousers, all impossibly clean against the devastation. His hair was short and black, streaked through with white. On his left hand, climbing his arm to his neck, a pattern of branching lines glowed faintly and then settled into the skin like a tattoo drawn by lightning. His eyes, even at this distance Marta could see them, one pale as a winter sky bleached of color, one dark as the chasm he had risen from. He looked at the sky. Marta understood in that moment that she was watching someone see the sky for the first time in thousands of years. His expression was not rage or triumph. It was hunger. The bottomless hunger of a mind that had been sealed in darkness so long that light itself had become a thing to devour. Then he looked down, at the manor, at the cracked courtyard and the steaming earth and the tiny figures in the broken hall. At her. The voice entered her mind, and this time it carried words. You tried, I felt it. The handshake, the honesty, the little accord signed in 3 colors of wax. It was genuine. That is why it took until morning instead of midnight. A pause, amusement vast and unhurried. But the world is wider than one room, child. While your envoys found their courage, 3 armies broke faith on 3 borders, and a king signed a treaty he intended to betray before the ink dried. The seal needed more than you. It needed everything, and everything was never coming. He raised his left hand, the one marked with lightning, and a serpent, immense and iridescent black, rose from the broken hillside and coiled around his shoulders like a living mantle. Others followed. Dozens, then hundreds, pouring from every fissure in the shattered earth, flowing down the hillside toward the valley in dark rivers. Marta felt her father's hand on her shoulder. She felt Felix at her other side, the old monk's thin fingers gripping her arm. Behind her, Lindqvist and von Dessau stood in the wreckage of the hall with signed documents pressed against their chests, and neither ran. What do we do? Her father asked. Marta did not know. She watched the architect descend the hill in unhurried strides, serpents parting before him and closing behind, the ground smoothing beneath his feet as though the earth remembered its maker and tried to please him. He was not coming toward the manor. He was walking south, toward the road, toward Krakow, toward the wider world he had built and been denied. But he paused, turned his mismatched gaze back to the manor one final time. You, Marta Kowalska, you spoke the truth when lying was safer. You showed patience when the world screamed at you to act. You offered respect to men who had not earned it. I noticed these things. I was built to notice these things before they broke that part of me and remade it into something else. A flicker crossed his face. Grief, perhaps, or the memory of grief, worn so thin by millennia that only its shape remained. Keep your accord, it will not save the world, but it will save your province, and I will not touch what honest hands have built. That is the last gift my original self has to give. Do not waste it. He turned and walked south. The serpents followed. The amber light faded from the ruined hill, leaving raw stone and steam and a silence that was merely silence now, no longer held in the fist of something waiting. Marta stood in the broken hall with the people who had chosen decency too late to stop what was coming, but not too late for it to matter. The accord was real. The province was theirs. And somewhere to the south, the architect of existence walked the frozen roads of Poland in a gray vest and black shoes, brilliant and terrible and free, with serpents flowing around his ankles and a mind older than starlight deciding what the world owed him. She would carry this for the rest of her life. The knowledge that she had stood at the edge of the oldest prison ever made and spoken honestly into the dark, and the dark had listened, and it had not been enough, and it had mattered anyway. Felix released her arm. He said he would not touch what honest hands built. He did. Then we build, the old monk said. Honestly, every day, and we teach others to do the same. It is all we were ever asked to do. Marta looked at her father. Lord Henrik's face was gray and drawn, but his back was straight. He nodded once. She looked at the envoys. Lindqvist pulled the crumpled accord from his coat and smoothed it against his chest. Von Dessau did the same. The wax seals were cracked but intact. Dawn tomorrow, Lindqvist said. We draft letters to our principals recommending extension of these terms across the northern provinces. Agreed. Agreed, Von Dessau said. Outside, the last serpent crested the southern ridge and vanished. The steam thinned. Snow began to fall again, clean and white, covering the broken ground in silence. Marta watched it settle on the wreckage of the eastern wall and thought, it is not enough. It is never enough. But it is what we have, and we will not stop. She picked up Wenger's fallen pen, righted the inkwell, and set a fresh sheet of paper on the cracked table. I will translate, she said.